The summer sun beat down on the historic grounds of Buckingham Palace as crowds of excited tourists gathered around the iconic gates. The air buzzed with chatter and the constant clicking of cameras, while children pointed in awe at the royal guards in their distinctive red uniforms and bearskin caps. It was just another typical afternoon in London, or so everyone thought. Among the sea of visitors stood a middle-aged American tourist, phone in hand, his face flushed red from the unusual London heat. He'd been drinking at a nearby pub, celebrating his first trip to England, and now seemed determined to get the perfect social media content. But his idea of perfect content would soon turn this ordinary day into an international incident. The royal guard stood perfectly still at his post, his posture impeccable, embodying centuries of military tradition. Despite the sweltering heat, his uniform was spotless, his boots gleaming in the sunlight. He was more than just a tourist attraction. He was a highly trained soldier with years of military service under his belt. "Hey you! Yeah, you in the funny hat," the tourist called out, his voice carrying over the crowd. Several nearby visitors turned to look, some already cringing at his loud behavior. A young couple from Canada exchanged uncomfortable glances, while a family from Japan quietly stepped away from the developing scene. The guard remained motionless, as he was trained to do. His eyes stayed fixed forward, his grip steady on his rifle. But the tourist wasn't satisfied with being ignored. He started making increasingly offensive remarks, his words slurring slightly as he moved closer to the barrier. Other tourists began pulling out their phones, sensing something newsworthy was about to happen. A street vendor selling ice cream nearby caught the attention of two police officers who regularly patrolled the area. They started making their way through the crowd, but not quickly enough. The situation was about to escalate beyond anyone's expectations. "I'm gonna make you move," the tourist declared, fumbling with his phone as he tried to film himself. The crowd's murmurs turned to gasps as he suddenly ducked under the barrier, crossing a line both literal and figurative. A mother quickly pulled her children back, while several onlookers shouted warnings. The guard's training kicked in immediately. Years of discipline and protocol guided his every move. He could see the tourist approaching from his peripheral vision, but he maintained his position. His mind raced through procedures and protocols while his body remained still as a statue. The tourist, now just feet away, reached for the guard's rifle, and that's when everything changed. In a split second, the atmosphere shifted from tense anticipation to shocked amazement. The next few moments would be replayed millions of times across social media platforms worldwide. Nobody in the crowd could have predicted what would happen next, but everyone knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. The phones kept recording, capturing every detail of an incident that would soon make headlines across the globe and spark important conversations about respect, dignity, and the consequences of poor choices. As the tourist's fingers brushed against the rifle's barrel, time seemed to slow down. The guard's decades of training were about to be put to the test in front of hundreds of witnesses. The next few seconds would demonstrate the difference between the ceremonial nature of his post and the very real military training that lay beneath the historic uniform. The peaceful afternoon at Buckingham Palace had suddenly transformed into a moment that would be discussed, debated, and analyzed for months to come. And for the guard who started his shift expecting nothing more than another day at his post, life was about to change in ways he never imagined. What happened next left the crowd absolutely speechless. The guard, who had stood as still as a statue for hours, suddenly came to life with the fluid grace of a trained professional. His movement was so quick that many tourists later said they had to watch their videos in slow motion to fully understand what occurred. The tourist's fingers had barely touched the rifle when the guard's military training took over. Years of experience in the armed forces merged perfectly with his ceremonial duties. Without any wasted motion, he shifted his weight and used a textbook restraint technique that looked almost dance-like in its precision. "Stay back," the guard commanded, his voice carrying the full weight of authority. The tourist, who moments ago had been so confident, found himself efficiently but carefully pinned against the palace railings. The guard's movements were measured and controlled, using just enough force to contain the situation without causing any harm. The crowd fell into a stunned silence before erupting in a mix of gasps and applause. A group of schoolchildren who had been on a field trip watched with wide eyes as their teacher quickly turned this into an impromptu lesson about respecting others and following rules. An elderly couple who had been visiting London for their 50th anniversary would later tell their grandchildren about this moment over Sunday dinner. Nearby, a street photographer captured the entire sequence in stunning detail. His pictures would later show the guard's face, not angry or aggressive, but completely professional, focused solely on protecting his post and maintaining order. These images would soon become powerful symbols of dignity under pressure. The tourist, now realizing the gravity of his mistake, stopped struggling. His face showed a mix of embarrassment and shock as the reality of his situation sank in. His phone, which he had been using to film his prank, clattered to the ground, its screen cracking on the historic cobblestones. Several onlookers noted how the guard carefully avoided stepping on it, showing respect for property even in this tense moment. Two police officers who had been making their way through the crowd finally arrived at the scene. They were impressed by how perfectly the guard had handled the situation. One officer would later tell reporters that in his 15 years of service around Buckingham Palace, he had never seen such a textbook response to provocation. The guard's fellow servicemen, watching from their posts, maintained their positions perfectly, though many would later say they felt immense pride in their colleagues' handling of the situation. This was exactly what they had trained for, the ability to switch from ceremonial duty to active security in a split second when necessary. A tourist from New Zealand, who happened to be a retired military instructor, was filming the entire incident. He would later post a detailed analysis of the guard's technique, pointing out how every movement was designed to control the situation while minimizing any risk of injury to either party. As the police took control of the situation, the guard smoothly returned to his post, resuming his ceremonial stance as if nothing had happened. This simple act of returning to duty spoke volumes about his professionalism and training. The crowd, still buzzing with excitement, noticed how he adjusted his uniform with a single precise movement before becoming completely still once again. The whole incident had lasted less than 30 seconds, but it had demonstrated something profound about the royal guards that many tourists often forgot. Beneath their ceremonial uniforms were highly trained military professionals. The guards' response had been a perfect balance of force and restraint, showing exactly why these positions were entrusted to only the most disciplined soldiers. In those few moments, he had transformed from what many tourists saw as a photo opportunity into a clear reminder of the serious nature of his duty. His actions would soon become a teaching example in military training programs, showing how to maintain both dignity and effectiveness under extreme provocation. The next few minutes outside Buckingham Palace unfolded like a well-choreographed scene, though nothing about it was planned. Police officers quickly took charge of the situation, their years of experience evident in their calm but firm handling of the tourist. The crowd, still buzzing with excitement, formed a respectful distance as directed by the officers. A young couple from Brazil, who had been live-streaming their London vacation, suddenly found themselves broadcasting to thousands of viewers worldwide. Their followers jumped from a few hundred to several thousand in minutes as news of the incident spread across social media platforms. Their unplanned coverage would later be picked up by major news networks, offering a unique perspective of the events as they unfolded. The tourist, now handcuffed and significantly more subdued, sat on a nearby bench while officers processed the scene. His earlier bravado had completely vanished, replaced by a look of genuine regret. A police officer handed him a cup of water, showing professional courtesy even in this tense situation. Several witnesses came forward, eager to share their videos and statements with the authorities. Meanwhile, the guard remained at his post, standing perfectly still as if the last few minutes had never happened. Tourists who arrived after the incident wouldn't have guessed anything was amiss, except for the unusually large crowd and the presence of additional police officers. A group of local school children on a field trip arrived just then, their teacher using the moment to explain the importance of respecting cultural institutions and those who protect them. The police's response team worked with impressive efficiency. Within minutes, they had gathered statements from key witnesses and secured multiple video recordings of the incident. A tourist from Canada, who happened to be a legal professional, remarked to her family how thoroughly the officers documented everything, ensuring a proper chain of evidence. Social media was already exploding with different angles of the incident. A nearby coffee shop owner noticed his Wi-Fi usage spike as tourists rushed to upload their videos. He started handing out free tea to the police officers and witnesses, turning an unfortunate incident into a moment of community support. His small act of kindness would later be mentioned in several news reports about the day's events. The palace's official security team arrived to review the situation, their unmarked cars pulling up quietly at the side entrance. They moved with practiced precision, gathering information while maintaining the dignity of the location. Tourist groups continued their visits, now with added excitement as guides incorporated the fresh incident into their tours, emphasizing the dual role of the guards as both ceremonial figures and trained military personnel. A grandmother from Scotland, visiting with her grandchildren, used the moment to share stories about her late husband who had served as a royal guard decades ago. Her eyes welled up with pride as she explained to the children how the guard's response reflected the highest standards of military training and discipline. Her impromptu history lesson attracted a small crowd of its own as tourists gathered to hear first-hand accounts of the guard's traditions. The Metropolitan Police's social media team quickly posted a brief, professional statement about the incident, asking witnesses to come forward with any additional information. Their measured response helped calm wild speculation that had already started spreading online. They emphasized that the situation had been handled according to protocol and that all parties were safe. As the afternoon wore on, the regular rhythm of palace life gradually resumed. Tour buses continued to arrive and depart, though now with an added story to tell. Street vendors returned to their usual spots, their conversations with customers now peppered with first-hand accounts of what they'd witnessed. A pair of local journalists arrived, quietly gathering information for the evening news, careful not to disturb the renewed calm. The guard's shift would end in a few hours, but his example of professionalism would last much longer. Without speaking a word, he had demonstrated the perfect balance of duty, restraint, and action. Young officers in training would soon study this incident, learning how to maintain composure under pressure while ensuring public safety. As the sun began to shift in the sky, casting long shadows across the palace grounds, the day's events had already begun transforming from a potentially dangerous incident into a powerful lesson about respect, professionalism, and the serious nature of ceremonial duties. Within hours of the incident, the internet was buzzing with activity. The first video, posted by a high school student from Singapore, reached 1 million views in just 40 minutes. She had captured the entire sequence perfectly on her phone while visiting London with her parents. "I just wanted to take a normal tourist photo," she later told a news channel. "I never expected to document something this important." The footage spread like wildfire across social platforms. A small coffee shop owner near the palace noticed his morning regulars were all watching the same video on their phones. "Everyone was talking about it," he shared. Even people who'd seen it in person came back to show others exactly where it happened. His shop became an impromptu gathering spot for discussing the incident, with tourists and locals alike sharing their perspectives. Different angles of the video started popping up everywhere. A retired photography teacher from Italy had captured stunning slow-motion footage that clearly showed the guard's incredible restraint and professionalism. His post included a thoughtful analysis of the guard's technique, which military training experts later praised for its accuracy. Social media communities rallied around the guard. Supportive messages poured in from around the world, with many people sharing their own positive experiences with the Royal Guards. A group of veterans started a thread explaining the intense training these guards undergo, helping people understand that behind the ceremonial uniform stands a highly skilled military professional. The Brazilian couple's livestream from earlier had been picked up by major news networks. Their authentic reaction to the events, switching between Portuguese and English in their excitement, added a genuine human touch to the coverage. "We couldn't believe how fast our video spread," they said in a follow-up post. "We're just glad we could show people how professional the guard was." Online communities began sharing historical information about the Royal Guards. A university student's thread about the Guards' training and traditions went viral, helping people understand the deep responsibility these soldiers carry. "They're not tourist attractions," she wrote. "They're highly trained military personnel who take their duty seriously." Memes started appearing too, but surprisingly respectful ones. Instead of mocking the situation, most celebrated the guard's composure and professionalism. A popular one showed the guard beside other famous examples of grace under pressure, earning thousands of shares and supportive comments. The palace's official social media accounts saw unprecedented engagement. While they maintained their characteristic restraint, simply acknowledging the incident with a brief statement, the public filled their comments section with messages of support and appreciation. Many shared stories of their own visits to the palace and their respect for the guard's dedication. A local artist near Buckingham Palace quickly sketched the scene from memory and shared it online. A simple but powerful drawing captured the dignity of the guard's response, and within hours, people were requesting prints. She decided to donate the proceeds to a veterans charity, turning a viral moment into something meaningful. Tech-savvy teachers around the world began using the incident as a teaching moment. One history teacher in Australia created a popular online lesson about the Royal Guard's history and importance, using the viral videos to engage his students in a deeper conversation about tradition, duty, and respect. By evening, news channels were interviewing social media experts about how rapidly the story had spread. What's remarkable, one analyst noted, is how this incident changed people's perception of the Royal Guards. Many now see beyond the ceremonial aspect to appreciate the real military professionals underneath. The most touching responses came from everyday people. A grandmother in Scotland shared how she used the videos to teach her grandchildren about respect and dignity. A bus driver in London described how all his passengers that afternoon were discussing the incident, bringing strangers together in conversation. These personal connections, formed through shared experience and social media, showed how a single moment of professionalism could unite people across the globe. The legal wheels began turning swiftly after the incident. The tourist found himself in a small, brightly lit room at the local police station, the gravity of his actions finally sinking in. His earlier bravado had completely disappeared, replaced by quiet reflection. A duty solicitor explained the seriousness of his situation in clear terms, while police officers processed his paperwork with practiced efficiency. Back at the palace, the Metropolitan Police's special events team was building what they called an airtight case. A young officer spent hours organizing the overwhelming amount of video evidence that had poured in from tourists. "I've never seen anything like it," she told her supervisor. "Usually we have to search for witnesses, but this time, they're coming to us with crystal clear footage from every possible angle." The Crown Prosecution Service took special interest in the case. A senior prosecutor who had handled similar cases involving public servants recognized its significance. "This isn't just about one incident," she explained to her team during their morning briefing. "It's about protecting all our service members and ensuring visitors understand the serious nature of their duties." The tourists' embassy became involved, sending a representative to ensure proper procedures were followed. The embassy official, after reviewing the evidence, could only shake his head in disappointment. "We always encourage our citizens to respect local customs and laws," he stated formally. "This incident goes against everything we stand for as visitors to another country." Local magistrates fast-tracked the case, understanding its public importance. The court clerk noticed how different this case felt from the usual tourist mishaps she processed. "There's something about this one," she mentioned to a colleague during their tea break. "It's making people think differently about how we treat our uniformed personnel." The evidence room at the police station looked like a social media command center. Officers carefully documented hundreds of videos and photographs, creating a timeline that showed the incident from every possible angle. A tech-savvy constable created a digital presentation that would later be praised by the prosecution team for its clarity and thoroughness. The tourist's hotel room was quietly cleared out by police officers, following all proper procedures. They found his travel journal, which painted a picture of an otherwise ordinary vacation turned disastrous by one terrible decision. The hotel manager, who had welcomed many tourists over the years, sadly packed up the guests' remaining belongings. "It's a shame," he told his staff. "One moment of poor judgment can change everything." Immigration officials began their own procedures. A veteran officer with 20 years of experience handled the case personally. She'd seen many visa violations, but this one stood out. When we issue a visa, she explained to a trainee, it's with the trust that visitors will respect our country and its institutions. Breaking that trust has consequences. The police investigation revealed interesting details about the moments before the incident. CCTV footage showed the tourist had been taking normal photos like any other visitor just an hour before. Something had changed in those 60 minutes that led to his poor decisions, a reminder of how quickly things can go wrong. Legal experts appearing on news programs explained the various charges in simple terms for the public. A retired judge provided valuable context. The law takes a particularly serious view of cases involving uniformed personnel, he stated. These men and women represent our institutions and deserve special protection. The court preparation team worked late into the evening, ensuring every detail was properly documented. A young law clerk, organizing the case files, found himself pausing at each witness statement. Each person saw something slightly different, he noted, but they all agreed on the guard's incredible professionalism. As the case moved forward, it became clear this would set an important precedent. The public gallery was full during each hearing, with many observers taking notes. A law student, watching the proceedings, summed it up perfectly in her blog. This case isn't just about punishing one person's actions, it's about reinforcing the respect our uniformed personnel deserve. The Ministry of Defense's recognition of the guard's actions came in a way that nobody expected. Rather than a simple commendation letter, they decided to use this incident as a teaching moment for future generations of soldiers. Early one morning, in a quiet ceremony that hadn't been announced to the press, the guard's commanding officer handed him a special commendation while his fellow soldiers stood at attention. What impressed us most, the commanding officer later shared with junior recruits, wasn't just how he handled the situation, but how he returned to his post immediately after. That's the kind of dedication we aim to instill in every soldier. The young recruits listened intently, many of them taking notes, knowing they were hearing about something special. The guard's old training instructor from his early military days watched the ceremony with pride. During the tea break, he shared stories about the guard's training years with the younger officers. He was always the one who kept his cool, the instructor recalled, sipping his tea. Even during the toughest exercises, he never lost his composure. Now the whole world knows why that matters. Veterans organizations across the country began using video footage from the incident in their training programs. A retired sergeant major, now teaching at a military academy, developed an entire lesson around it. Look at his footwork, he would tell his students, playing the video in slow motion. Every movement has a purpose. This is what years of training looks like in action. The incident sparked a renewal of interest in the Royal Guard training program. The military received numerous requests from journalists wanting to understand the selection and training process. A senior officer gave a rare interview about it. These guards aren't just ceremonial figures, he explained. They're elite soldiers who must meet incredibly high standards. What the public saw that day was just a glimpse of their capabilities. In the guards' mess hall, the atmosphere had changed subtly. The incident had reminded everyone of the dual nature of their role, ceremonial guard and active soldier. During lunch breaks, younger guards would ask questions about handling difficult situations, leading to valuable discussions about maintaining professionalism under pressure. A documentary filmmaker, working on a series about British military traditions, adjusted her entire schedule to include this story. She interviewed retired guards who shared similar experiences from their service years. The uniform comes with responsibilities, one veteran explained, his chest swelling with pride. When we stand at our post, we carry centuries of tradition on our shoulders. The guard himself remained humble throughout the recognition. During a required press briefing, he shifted attention away from himself and toward the training he'd received. I just followed my training, he said simply. Any of my colleagues would have done the same. His words resonated with military personnel worldwide who recognized the quiet professionalism in his response. Training centers across the armed forces requested detailed reports of the incident. A military analyst spent weeks breaking down every aspect of the guard's response. His report highlighted not just the physical techniques used, but the psychological discipline required to maintain composure under such pressure. This is what we mean by grace under fire, the analyst wrote. The Guards unit received letters from military units worldwide praising the display of professionalism. A group of international military attaches visited the palace to learn more about the training program. During their visit, they observed the changing of the Guard with newfound respect, understanding the years of discipline behind each precise movement. The incident became a regular topic in military leadership courses. Instructors used it to demonstrate how split-second decisions could impact not just the immediate situation, but also public perception of the military. A leadership consultant who worked with top military brass noted, "This single incident has done more to explain the importance of military bearing than 1,000 lectures could." As the story continued to resonate through military circles, it sparked important discussions about the evolving role of ceremonial guards in the modern world. The Guards' actions had shown that behind the traditional uniform and ceremonial duties stood a highly trained professional, ready to act when needed while maintaining the dignity of centuries of military tradition. The incident's impact on society went far beyond the original viral moment. 6 months later, tour guides at Buckingham Palace noticed a remarkable change in how visitors behaved around the Guards. "There's more respect now," observed one guide who had worked there for 15 years. "People still take photos, but they keep their distance and show proper appreciation for what these Guards represent." A local school teacher turned the incident into a powerful lesson about respect and responsibility. In her classroom, students discussed not just what happened, but why it mattered. "My students were amazed to learn about the Guards' training," she shared during a teachers' conference. "One little boy told me he'd always thought they were just standing there for pictures. Now he wants to learn more about military service." The gift shops near the palace added new educational displays about the Royal Guard's history and training. A shop owner noticed how visitors now spent more time reading about the Guard's background instead of just buying toy soldiers. "People want to understand the story behind the uniform," he explained while restocking his shelves. "They're not just looking for souvenirs anymore, they're seeking knowledge." Tourism companies updated their guidebooks and training materials. A veteran tour operator rewrote his entire section about palace visits. "We need to teach respect, not just take pictures," he explained during a tourism industry meeting. His company now includes a brief history of the Guards in every tour introduction, helping visitors understand the serious nature of their duty. The incident sparked meaningful conversations about respect for public servants worldwide. Police officers, firefighters, and other uniformed personnel reported noticing more respectful interactions with the public. A subway station manager noted how his uniformed staff received more courteous treatment from commuters. "It's like people suddenly remembered we're all here to serve and protect," he said. Social media platforms saw a lasting change too. Tourist photos with Guards started including respectful captions about military service and dedication. A popular travel blogger created a viral post about proper etiquette at ceremonial sites, which was shared by tourism boards around the world. "It's not just about getting likes anymore," she wrote. "It's about showing respect for traditions and the people who maintain them." The Guards example inspired a new generation of young people interested in military service. Recruitment officers reported increased inquiries about Guard duty positions. A recruitment officer shared how candidates now specifically mentioned the incident. "They talk about wanting to show that kind of professionalism and restraint. It's changed what people think military service means." Local coffee shops near the palace became unofficial forums for discussing the broader impact. Regular customers, both locals and tourists, shared their thoughts about how the incident changed their perspective. One barista kept a notebook of memorable conversations. A grandfather told his grandson, "City, that's what real strength looks like, staying calm when others lose their cool." Museums and historical societies received more requests for information about military traditions. A museum curator organized a special exhibit about ceremonial Guards worldwide. Visitors spend hours reading about the training and dedication these positions require, she noted. They're fascinated by the human stories behind the ceremonies. The incident even influenced popular culture. A documentary filmmaker created a series about people who maintain traditions in the modern world. The Guards story became a central example of how ceremonial roles carry real responsibility. "These aren't just traditions," the filmmaker explained in interviews. They're living links to our history, maintained by dedicated professionals. Teachers noticed students writing school essays about respect and duty, often citing the Guards' response as an example. A high school counselor shared how the incident helped teenagers understand the concept of composure under pressure. It's become a reference point for handling difficult situations with dignity, she explained during a parent-teacher meeting. 1 year after the incident, the overall atmosphere around Buckingham Palace had transformed. The Guards still stood their posts with the same dedication they always had, but now they did so before an audience that better understood and appreciated their role. As one senior guard noted during a rare interview, "We didn't change. People's understanding of what we do changed."